In 2007, two guys had no money. They couldn't pay their rent. They were in big financial trouble. Then one of them had an idea: blow up two air mattresses and put them in the living room. Why? Because there was a big design event in San Francisco that week, and every hotel in the city was full. So they said, let's rent out these air mattresses and give people breakfast too. That's how Airbed and Breakfast was born. The idea of renting a room to a stranger. A few years later, this small idea became a huge company. From two air mattresses on the floor, total weakness, total failure, to a company worth $84 billion. It now makes $12.24 billion every year. It keeps growing, and it makes a 20% profit margin. It took a huge piece of the travel market. This company got so big and so strong that it scared the biggest hotel chains in the world. Even giants like Marriott had to pay attention. This story is like David and Goliath. David is small and weak. He has almost nothing. But he has one weapon, a simple idea that solves a real problem, a problem nobody else had solved. David in this story is Airbnb. Their idea was simple: don't build hotels, just let normal people rent out their own space. No buildings to buy, no big costs. Just a website that connects people who have an extra room with people who need one. This simple idea is what let them grow so fast. Goliath is the hotel industry. Big hotel groups, huge buildings, years of experience, famous brand names, tons of money. Next to numbers like that, two guys with air mattresses look tiny and ridiculous. But look what happened. In this video, we're going to show you exactly how this happened. How two guys with air mattresses ended up scaring the biggest names in the hotel business, and how they went from nothing to becoming billionaires. Stay until the end because we're going to tell you one secret, something rich people don't usually tell you. The real shortcut to building something this big from nothing. How did Airbnb make money in the beginning when nobody trusted this idea? What mistake did the hotel industry make when they saw Airbnb coming? Can this same small guy who beats the giant strategy work in any business? Or did Airbnb just get lucky? But first, if you're new here, I'm Nice Guy. On this channel, we talk about business, marketing, and money, the real stories behind big companies, the stuff they don't tell you in the news. If you like this kind of content, subscribe now, because we're just getting started. So let's rewind to the very beginning. Brian Chesky and Joe Gebbia were two broke roommates sharing a modest apartment in San Francisco. No job, no savings, barely enough to cover rent. They were exactly the kind of guys nobody would bet on. And that's the point. Because if two broke roommates with nothing could build something huge, then maybe anyone watching this video could too. They needed money, and they needed it fast. That's when San Francisco handed them an unexpected opening. A huge design conference was coming to town that week, and every single hotel in the city was fully booked. Thousands of people were arriving with nowhere left to stay. Brian and Joe looked at this problem and saw an opportunity. So they bought two cheap air mattresses, blew them up, and put them in their living room. Then they built a simple, ugly little website and called it Airbed and Breakfast. Strangers could rent a spot on the floor, get breakfast in the morning, and skip the hotel bill. It worked. They made $1,000. That $1,000 felt like a miracle. But the real win was the lesson behind it. Test small, test cheap, and let real people tell you if your idea works. Today, this is what's called an MVP, a minimum viable product. No big investment, no big risk, just a fast way to find out if anyone actually wants what you're selling. But the high didn't last long. Once the conference ended, the bookings stopped and the apartment went quiet again. The debt came back heavier than before. Brian and Joe were now buried in bills, stuck with an idea that had only worked for one lucky week. Most people would have quit right there. But they still believed something real was hiding inside this idea. They just didn't know how to prove it yet. So they got creative. Again. It was election season, Obama versus John McCain. Brian and Joe designed two limited edition cereal boxes, Obama O's and Captain McCain's, and sold each one for $40. The result? $30,000, enough to wipe out their debt completely. But the bigger win was the attention it brought. People started noticing these two guys who refused to quit. That attention still wasn't enough to convince investors. When Brian and Joe pitched their room renting idea, almost everyone said no. Too risky. Why would a stranger sleep in someone else's home? Why would anyone trust that? It sounded less like a business and more like a strange hobby. Then one meeting changed everything. They got in front of Paul Graham at Y Combinator, one of the most respected startup accelerators in the world. What convinced him wasn't a polished pitch deck. It was the cereal box story. Paul Graham figured if these two guys could sell cereal for $40 a box during an election, they could probably sell anything. That kind of hustle told him more than any spreadsheet ever could. Y Combinator gave them funding and mentorship, and that's where the real story of Airbnb begins. But this story is bigger than just two guys with an idea. It's also about timing. In 2008, the world was hit by a massive financial crisis, and tourism took a hard hit everywhere. Inside every crisis, though, there's an opening for the right idea. Families were losing spending power and needed cheaper ways to travel. At the same time, homeowners were feeling that same financial pressure, and many of them had something valuable sitting unused: an extra room, an empty apartment, a spare space doing nothing. The problem was that renting your home to a stranger wasn't a normal idea yet. People didn't trust it. Listings had blurry, low-quality photos, and there was no real system to build confidence between a host and a guest. At the exact same time, something else was shifting in the background: the rise of Web 2.0. The internet was becoming interactive and trust-based, built around reviews, profiles, and photos. Exactly the kind of tools needed to make a stranger-to-stranger marketplace actually work. Put it all together. And that's the real recipe behind Airbnb's success: a global crisis creating financial pressure, an untapped resource sitting in millions of homes, and a new kind of internet ready to connect it all. Airbnb didn't invent the need. They spotted the gap at the perfect moment and built the bridge.